In China, there is a building unlike almost anything else on Earth. Imagine swimming in an open-air infinity pool hundreds of meters above the ground, walking through a sky garden filled with over 100 fully grown trees, or standing on a sheet of glass while watching two massive rivers merge beneath your feet. All of this exists nearly a quarter kilometer in the air, suspended sideways across 4 separate skyscrapers. The structure uses nearly 12,000 tons of steel and glass and cost close to $5 billion to build. Almost immediately after videos of it spread online, the internet labeled it 3 things: a gimmick, a glorified tunnel, and a cheap copy of Marina Bay Sands. At first glance, those reactions make sense, but viral clips rarely tell the full story. And once you understand what this building truly is, words like gimmick and knockoff begin to feel far too simple. The internet quickly dismissed it as a fake skyscraper. Comment sections filled with the same criticism over and over again. That's not a skyscraper. That's just a tunnel. It's basically a bridge. The structure people are talking about is called the Crystal, the crown of Raffles City, Chongqing. Technically, critics aren't wrong. The Crystal is a sky bridge, a massive glass structure laid horizontally across the tops of several towers. But calling it merely a bridge misses something important. This is not just a walkway connecting buildings. It is, in many ways, an entire building turned sideways and lifted into the sky. And here is where the story becomes far more interesting. Almost nothing about this project is what people assume. First, despite its location, Raffles City is not purely a Chinese project. The Raffles brand comes from Singapore and belongs to a major Singaporean real estate company called Capitaland. They were the ones who invested billions into making this vision real. The architect behind it is Moshe Safdie, an Israeli-Canadian architect based in Boston. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Safdie is also the architect behind Marina Bay Sands, the iconic Singapore hotel famous for its boat-shaped rooftop stretching across 3 towers. That changes the narrative entirely. When people say Raffles City Chongqing is a Chinese copy of Marina Bay Sands, they have the story backwards. It is not China copying Singapore. It is the same architect, working with similar Singaporean investment, pushing his own architectural ideas even further. China provided the land, workforce, and opportunity. But the concept, capital, and brand came largely from outside. That single fact transforms the entire conversation. This is no longer a story about one country showing off. Instead, it becomes the story of a foreign company making an enormous bet on Chinese soil. A bet that they could build something nobody had ever built before. And that gamble began with one of the most difficult building sites imaginable. Capitaland chose a site at the tip of Chaotianmen Peninsula in Chongqing, where 2 of China's great rivers, the Yangtze and the Jialing, meet. This location is both beautiful and brutal. Chongqing is often called China's mountain city. It is known for steep terrain, stacked roads, layered neighborhoods, and almost no flat land. Building here is challenging, even under normal circumstances. But this site was even harder. Sat on a narrow wedge of sloped land, squeezed between 2 powerful rivers, in a region known for strong winds and seismic activity. From an engineering perspective, it was a nightmare. So why choose such an impossible location? Because it was also the most valuable. Chongqing is one of the fastest-growing urban regions on Earth, with a municipality population of around 30 million people. Land is incredibly precious. Flat buildable space is rare. The confluence of the 2 rivers is Chongqing's postcard view, the city's historic heart and one of its most iconic locations. It was difficult, it was risky, but it was the only place worthy of a project this ambitious. Then comes the part most people misunderstand. That glorified tunnel was never designed to function as a simple tunnel. Most sky bridges are narrow passages built for convenience. They allow people to move between buildings without going outside. The crystal is nothing like that. It stretches 300 meters long, spans over 30 meters wide, and rises more than 26 meters tall. That is enormous. Those dimensions are large enough to contain entire buildings worth of usable space. And all of it sits around 250 meters above the ground, supported by 4 towers at once. Inside the crystal are restaurants, bars, observation areas, gardens, a clubhouse, and even a swimming pool. To understand the scale, compare it to Marina Bay Sands. Marina Bay Sands' famous sky park sits about 200 meters above the ground and connects 3 towers. The crystal sits higher, stretches farther, and connects 4 towers instead of 3. Only one sky bridge in the world surpasses it in height, the one atop the Kingdom Center in Riyadh. Yes, calling it a horizontal skyscraper is partly marketing. But once you realize they effectively built a full-size structure and placed it across 4 rooftops in midair, the label stops sounding ridiculous. The real question becomes something else entirely. How do you build something like that? That is where engineering turns from impressive to astonishing. The crystal weighs around 12,000 tons. You cannot simply construct something that massive in the sky using ordinary methods. It spans a large empty gap between towers, meaning every piece must align perfectly. The engineers came up with a daring solution. They divided the entire structure into 9 separate segments. Some smaller segments were assembled in the air, but the largest and heaviest sections were built on the ground first, fully assembled, then lifted. 3 of the central steel sections each weighed as much as 1,100 tons. Each one had to be hoisted approximately 250 meters into the air. That had never been done before at such scale. It was a world-first engineering operation. And lifting something that heavy is not as simple as attaching cables and pulling upward. Weather had to be perfect. Engineers waited for calm wind conditions, because even slight swaying could turn an 1,100-ton steel structure into a catastrophic hazard. A strong gust at the wrong moment could have caused disaster. Precision was equally critical. Every segment needed to connect to neighboring segments with extremely small tolerances. Unlike ground construction, you cannot easily adjust alignment once massive sections are hanging in open air. That is the real engineering miracle, not vague statements like engineers are smart. This was a team literally flying pieces of the building into the sky and assembling them hundreds of meters above the ground.